Okay, Tov. Hope everyone's doing well. Welcome back to another session on our Tzurba M'Rabanan class. We are studying Hilchot Chukot HaGoyim, the laws of the nations, and that's what our topic is going to be over the next little bit. We are in volume 1 of this sefer. If you're learning with us online, and Bruchim Habayim to everyone that's here. Today's topic, what can I say? I hope, let's see the people that are joining and are watching online when they see the topic. Can I go to the Super Bowl? It is Superbowl Sunday, this coming Sunday. The cheapest tickets right now on StubHub are going for almost $5,000 Canadian. All right, so what is that? 3,500 US roughly, Mashu Kazeh, something like that. That's the cheapest seat. So assuming I had tickets and I was a big football fan, you would say, okay, for sure, go. What could be the issue? Well, not necessarily. That's going to be our topic today. But you're going to have to wait to the end to see what we're going to say about it. Although we're going to speak about a little bit, not Super Bowl, but we're going to speak a little bit about it now. But we'll see the actual psak towards the end of the class about attending stadiums. That's what we're going to talk about. So the prohibition of Chukot HaGoyim, which is following the laws and the statutes of Goyim. We're on page number 99, shiur number 3 in the book. The prohibition is mitzvah number 262 in our Torah, and the Sefer HaChinuch begins in source number 1 by saying, why do we have such a law? Why do we need to be why does it need to be codified? Why does God need to tell us, as one of 613 mitzvot, not to follow the statutes of the Gentiles? And he writes, Kedei leitrachek mehem, to distance ourselves from them, v'lignot kol hanhagotehem, and also distance ourselves and disgrace of all their practices, va'afilu bemalbus, even when it comes to clothing. The actual pasuk of this is found in Sefer Vayikra, kema'aseh eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem ba lo ta'asu. Like the practice of the land of Egypt in which you dwell, do not do. Do not do the practice like they did in Egypt. Uchma'aseh eretz Canaan, and what they did in Canaan, the place where I'm bringing you, shama lo ta'asu, don't do what they do. Okay, so where you came from, don't do. Where you're going to, don't do. Ufchukotehem lo telechu, and then do not follow their statutes. So Rashi says here, why point out Mitzrayim and Maaseh Canaan? The Egyptians and the Canaanites were the most denigrated of all nations. It was a place where Israel dwelled, and I was referring to Egypt, was the worst of them all. Okay, so therefore there was a lot of horrible things going on in the land of Egypt. There was also a lot of horrible things going to take place in Canaan when the Jews entered there, and therefore the Torah had to command us, "Uchukotehem lo telechu." Rashi says, what did the verse leave over that already said? Meaning, Rashi's asking, if you already told me I shouldn't do follow the ways of Egypt, and I should not follow the ways of Israel, why you have to repeat again and don't follow their ways? Like, that's pretty obvious. So he says, Ela elu nemusot shelaim. Because the last statement of don't follow their statutes is in regards to their nemusot, which are customs. They're social customs. Dvarim achakukin lahem, which are entrenched as law. Says Rashi, kegon tratiot ve'itztadiot, such as going to theaters and stadiums. Rashi, living 1,000 years ago, okay, said going to theaters and stadiums of the Goyim is included in the laws of uvchukotehem lo telechu. And so Rabbi Meir says, Elu darchei Amori shemanu chachamim, these are the ways of the Amorites enumerated by the sages. And on page 100, there's other psukim, other sources where the Torah speaks about not following the ways of the nation, okay, unless you be attracted after them, after being destroyed, right? You're going to say, if these nations can worship their gods, so I can worship their gods. Don't perform their practices. A lot going on over here, brought down on the on page number 11. But let's go to source number 8 on page 101, which is the Sifra. The Sifra explains what is the essence of the prohibition, and he says, he asks the same question as Rashi. The Torah already tells us, don't pass your children and your son and your daughter through fire, which was a form of idol worship, and don't practice divination. So, what's the purpose of this extra law of don't follow statutes? So he says, don't follow their traditions that are entrenched as law. Kegon tiatrot, that's theaters, karkasaot, that's circuses, and istariot, that's stadiums. All right. So we see over here, he also brings other opinions on Rabbi Yehuda bebetera, shilot tinhod, which means don't stab an animal without shechting it, velo tigdal tzitzit, velo tispor komesafa, and do not grow one's fringes, and do not have a haircut in the way of the goyim. These are different things that belong to the category of luvchokotehem lo telechu. Okay, now it's interesting. Moving on to page 102, source number 9. We don't really know. It's very general. It's a very general statement about don't follow their statutes. So what does that mean? What are the parameters? What am I supposed to bound this law by? So we're going to look at a few Mishnayot and Gemaras here. Hopefully, give us an idea of what this is, and then after which we'll try to make sense of what do I need to look for, or what did the rabbi specifically prohibit that belonged to the non-Jew, or that non-Jews did, because one can argue the non-Jews do everything. So if the non-Jews eat at a restaurant, so I can't eat at a restaurant, like how does that work? The non-Jews socialize at a bar. Can I not go to a bar? So what exactly are the parameters of this? So he begins with a Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin, okay, that says, how am I supposed to administer the death penalty for someone who was liable for hedeg? Hedeg is cutting through the sword. Right? It's one of the 4 death penalties that we have is hedeg. So the Mishnah says, Hayu matizin et rosho besaif. The execution is that his head is cut off with a sword. Kederech she'amalchut osa, just like the monarchy does. Comes Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Nivulu lo, that degrades the guy. We don't want to degrade him. Ela manichin et rosho ala sadan vekotzetz bekofitz. We place his head on the block and we chop it off with an axe. Okay, a little less gruesome and a little bit more honorable for the guy. So Amru lo, the rabbis told him back, En mita menuvel mizo. That's the most degrading death penalty you can have. You put the guy's head on a block and you chop it. What could be worse than that? That's the Mishnah. Says Gemara, Tanya, Amar len Rabbi Yehuda lechachamim. The Rabbi Yehuda said to the rabbis, Afani yodea shemita menuvelati. I know that taking the guy's head and putting it on a chop block, okay, is degrading. Aval ma'aseh? But what can I say? Share amnat Torah v'chukotem lo telechu. The Torah said that you should not follow their ways. And the ways of the Goyim was not to use a chop block, but to just slice the guy's head off with a sword. Okay? So therefore, if that's the way of the non-Jews, so I can't follow that. So therefore, we use the chop block to cut the guy's head off. So the rabbis ask, Kevan de kativ saif be'oraita lo minayu kagamrina. Here's the chidush. Rabbi said, since the sword, the concept of the sword is written in the Torah, then you're not learning it from the Gentiles. The fact that the Gentiles use a sword, okay, to cut the guy's head off, okay, that doesn't mean we can't use a sword either, because the Torah says we could use a sword. You don't have to resort to an axe. And because the Gentiles use a sword, the Torah already says that we can use it. However, there's another Gemara, another Mishnah in Masechet Avodah Zarah that seems to present a different picture. The Mishnah says, "Elu edehen shel ovdei kochavim." These are the festivals of the Gentiles: Kalenda, Satrona, Kartisim, Yom Genusia shel Malchehem, Yom Aleida, Yom Hamita, Divrei Rabbi Meir. So, Calendar, Saturnalia, Kratisim, the King's Day of Accession, and the day of birth of the king, and the day of death. These are all of the non-Jewish holidays that they used to, and they are the reason why the Mishnah tells us these days is to avoid doing business with the non-Jews during these days, and certainly the days before that, because they would attribute any type of parnasa and income and revenue to their God. So therefore, these are the days you have to worry about. And the rabbis say, Kol mitah sheyesh ba srefa, every death that involves burning, that has burning, involves idol worship. And while a death that does not have burning does not have idol worship. So what do we see from here? The Gemara says, according to Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, there's no difference whether a death has burning or not. Okay, in any event, they're worshiping idols on the day of the death of the king. I mean, it's irrelevant whether or not there's actual burning involved. The king died, then they're worshiping idols. Alama, we see srefa lav chukahi. Clearly, the concept of burning is not a statute of the non-Jews, because they're not. It's not something that they're doing. But the rabbis hold srefa chukahi. It is a statute. But didn't we learn we make burnings for the kings and it's not considered darchei amori? So therefore, how are we able to burn ourselves? How can we burn any item? How are we allowed to burn any items if clearly maybe the ways of the goyim, this is what they used to do? Everybody holds burning is not a statute, but rather a sign of importance. Okay? So what we're seeing over here is we need to figure out on what is considered something that is a statute and not a statute of the goyim. Tosfot gives two explanations. We're not going to look at Tosfot inside. We'll read the summary on page 104. But Tosfot says that activities performed by Gentiles as part of their idolatrous ritual are prohibited, even if they are written in the Torah. Meaning, if the non-Jew is burning incense for their idols, okay, then even if the Torah tells us burning incense, well, whatever, you can't do it, because that would be because they're using it for idol worship, for avodah zarah. Activities, however, performed for no logical reason. Okay, this is a big thing. No logical reason. Then, if the Torah talks about it, it's not forbidden. But if the Torah doesn't talk about it, it is forbidden. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the responsa of the Maharik. And then we'll look at what the Rama actually brings down the halacha. The Maharik says, in order to say this is a statute of the Gentiles, then two things we need to take into consideration. Number one, that there is no reason to why they're doing something. The whole definition of the word chok is something that has no logic. Okay, and therefore, as if it fits into that category, then and there's no apparent reason, that would be something you're not allowed to do. The second issue, okay, is בעניין השני, I'm just scrolling down, יש לאסור משום חוקות הגויים, לפי הנזכר לעניות דעתי, הוא הדבר ששייך פה נדנוד פריצת גדר הצניעות v'ha'anava yinagu bo hagoyim gam ze asur. If the non-Jews do something that breaches the fences of modesty and humility, then that is prohibited. So that's not allowed. So if they do something that breaches tzniut, that breaches modesty, okay, or with humility, then that is not allowed. He says, "V'chen ha'omer hoi ve'en yotzin shehu mechaven litmadu aleach, aval b'inyan acher lo." He said, so when one attempts to imitate the non-Jew in the way that they dress, that would be something that is not allowed. Okay, because generally the non-Jews have a breach in modesty, and therefore that's something that not good. However, okay, certain things are okay. And he gives an example. If someone wears a cape, he's referring to a white cape that doctors used to wear. Okay, there is no prohibition. Why? Meaning, a person can argue, well, look at the non-Jewish society. Every doctor wears his shrubs and whatever it is, right? Every doctor has their uniform, or police officer has their uniform. So I'm not allowed to wear. If I'm a doctor and a Jew, I can't wear the same thing as a non-Jewish doctor. So I have to wear a Jewish robe? No, because that is not done for no purpose. That's brought to a signal and that he's a doctor, respect. He's reached a certain level of chokhmah, and that's the robe that he wears. Same thing with a police officer. So there needs to be a combination of two things: there's no reason for it, and a lack of need. So comes the Rama in source number 14. He says this is the halacha. He says everything that we said with regards to chukotem lo telechu, kol ze eno asur ela bedavar shenagu bo avdei kochavim leshum pritzut. Things that the non-Jews do for licentiousness. Kegon shenagu lilbos malbushim adumim. One thing is that they wear red clothing. From here, a lot of people have a custom, Jews have a custom not to wear red clothing at all. Okay? Because red is a sign of promiscuity, right? And ve'u malbush sarim, and also red clothing is the attire of dignitaries. It's also clothing that is immodest. Or another thing that you're not allowed to do, like we said, things that do not have any apparent reason. It's something that might be suspected to be the way of the Amorite and contains an element of idol worship. Something that you do for a useful purpose. Anybody that's a doctor has specific clothing. In that situation, you would be allowed to wear it. Okay? So the Rama draws the line of what is allowed and what's not allowed. For those of you that are just joining us, you probably were attracted through the title of tonight's class about Super Bowl. We're going to get to Super Bowl. We have made a little bit of a connection to it already, quoting Rashi in the opening parts of the shiur. We're learning about chukotehem lo telechu. We are commanded not to follow the statutes of the non-Jews. And Rashi there asks the question: if you're already telling me not to follow the ways of the Egyptians and the way of the Canaanites, why do you have to tell me chukotehem lo telechu? So Rashi there says not to follow their customs, and their customs include going to theaters, circuses, or stadiums, and that's what we're going to get to eventually. Right now, this concept of chukotem lo telechu has been defined and by the Rama to include something that is either immodest, wearing something that is immodest, or doing something that leads to immodesty, or doing something that has no logical reason. If it falls into any of those categories, a person would be transgressing chukotehem lo telechu. However, the Vilna Gaon is more strict when it comes to this. We're going to skip to source number 16, which is just a summary of 15. The Vilna Gaon, the Biur Agra says, Ela devadai hakol asur. He says everything is not allowed. Even if there's logic to the action, to their actions, and there's no licentiousness involved, you're not allowed to do it. Rak davka lilmod mehem asur. Even learning from them is prohibited. As the Torah said, we didn't learn v'lav davka mishum dechid beoraita ela kol davar she'enu osim shulatam mutar. Anything that we would have done on our own without them is permitted. But otherwise, if we wouldn't have done it on our own, and this is just something that the non-Jews taught us, we cannot replicate. We cannot do this. All right? Maybe one of the reasons, I'm just throwing this out there, maybe one of the reasons why we saw many, many Jews that dress a certain way, okay? Not with the times, and they have a certain Jewish garb. All right. Why they have a Jewish garb? Because that's my garb, and it's not. I'm not going to dress in the way of the. It was the non-Jew that decides of what we should wear in this century or this decade, and therefore I'm going to avoid it. Certainly in Morocco and Middle Eastern countries, they had their own way of dressing, and this could be the thing. So, if does the prohibition exist if there is a logical reason for the reason why the Gentiles are doing it? According to the Marik and the Ramah, there's no prohibition. So, for example, a person might say, well, nowadays, I don't know, these shirts are more comfortable. They're stretchy, so we could change our garb a little bit, all right? And they come up with reasons, and therefore there's no prohibition. But Vilna Gaon says, no, you're only allowed to do that assuming you would have done it on your own. But if there's no guarantee, so according to Vilna Gaon, a doctor can't wear his doctor uniform because not necessarily would you wore that on your own. Who was the first guy to dictate that doctors need to wear their uniform? I don't know. I can't tell you. But Vilna Gaon says if a Jew wasn't going to figure it out by himself, then you can't wear it. Obviously, very few people follow the Vilna Gaon in this situation. We follow the Ramah. But let's look at what Ovadia Yosef writes in source number 17, the Yakut Yosef. It says, "Askamat poskim harishonim achronim she'en isur chukodem lo telech unoeg ela ke'oseh davar meshuneh she'en bo ta'am klal." When you look at the Rishonim and the Achronim, they will all agree that there's no prohibition unless you do something that has no reason at all. Ela she'akum osim ken, but rather the goy does it, and therefore that's why I'm going to do it. Sheken mashmun lashon chok. That's the definition of the word chok, is that there is no logical reason. Clearly, you're just following them and accepting their practice. Maybe it could be that the reason why they wore this, or the reason why they burned this, or the reason why they did this action was because once upon a time there was some avodah zarah connection. There was an idolatry connection, and over the generations, they just forgot about it. And also, if something involves licentious behavior and leaves the geder of tzniut, and the non-Jews act on this way, and a person who does to imitate them, that's also not allowed. So even Rav Ovadia here agrees that these are the two criteria in order to forbid a person from transgressing this avera. The Hagaot Maimonid here writes, he quotes the Sefer Yereim, she'en leosif misvara, one should not add al ma shemanu chachamim based on logic to what the chachamim listed. That meaning only what the rabbi said you can't do, that's it. It's not for us to decide what else is considered chukot hagoyim. So if the rabbi spoke about a haircut, and one of the things that they spoke about was a haircut, by the way, haircut of the goyim, okay, which the Torah actually lists as one of the things of shaving the sides, right? and leaving only the front part. You see many goyim have the hair like this, and all this is shaven. That would be v'chukotehem lo telechu. Okay, right, yeah. Now even the Bach here in the Yoredea says v'chen sefer mitzvot gadol lavin nun in the negative commandment 50. Masir sheyeh Yisrael muvdal min hagoyim. Jews must be distinctive from Gentiles, b'malbus, in their clothes, b'minhag b'dibur, the way they talk. V'chen shitat haposkim. Anything that is unique to them, a Jew has to be separated from practicing, even if the rabbis didn't mention it. Why? Because the rabbis only mention activities that the Gentiles practice at that time. But really, the same applies to any practices that the Gentiles have created at any time of history. Jews must be distinctive in the way they act, in the way that they behave. Question, yeah.
Why didn't you have a whole explanation about, you shouldn't dress like them or do this like them? If at the end of the day, the simple answer is, at the end of the day, like, Jews have a certain way of talking and they have a certain way of behaving. Like, why would you bring all these other things to bring down to limit?
You do not disagree?
To limit. Well, I mean, I don't agree with not wearing a doctor's garment because it could be like what the Kohen did before.
Yeah.
I mean, also, like, did we talk about? I mean, like a few classes ago that celebrating Thanksgiving, the whole purpose of why we could potentially, because we're just being thankful. That's
well, exactly. So actually, celebrating Thanksgiving is part of this shiur, which we've already spoken about.
Right.
Okay, and we brought different. Rav Hutner said that it's inappropriate to celebrate Thanksgiving. Rav Moshe said it's fine, but you just don't do it on a permanent yearly basis, right? 100%.
Still directly falls under like what we're talking about. Which is I'm sure a Jew didn't create Thanksgiving. I'm sure.
Well, we know that there was
So even to this extent, like how can we leave it up to the rabbis to say, okay, let them dictate what we should do and what we shouldn't do?
We're not letting them dictate. That's exactly the point.
It's not.
No, what they're doing, we stay away from, unless we were going to do it anyways, or unless the Torah, like the Gemara said, unless the Torah already had mentioned it. Meaning, if the Torah didn't mention that you could use a sword to kill somebody, then it would be prohibited for the Jew to kill someone with a sword, because that was a way of the non-Jew.
Yeah, it was in the actual Torah.
Yeah, exactly. But because the Torah mentions it, then it's okay. But otherwise, unless you would think of that on yourself, then you wouldn't be able to do it. There's a big line here that's not so pashut, and that's why we still have to get back to our topic today, which is that of going to a stadium to watch the Super Bowl. But that's what we're going to speak right now. So let's look at what the Rambam says. Source number 20. The Rambam says, "Hamitzvah ashloshim hi," the 30th prohibition, shisiranu milechem midarchei kofrim, which is of walking from the ways of the heretics, uminaheg beminagotehem v'afil b'mambushehem, even in their clothing, and v'kutzei moshavam, and gathering in the halls. Ulshon sifra. What do we say? Benimusot shelahem. It's not following their customs. Bedabrim achukakim lahem kegon tratiot v'karksiot v'asrariot, like going to theater, circuses, and arenas. Elu hem minim min hamoshavim shayu mitkabtzim ba'em la'avodat tzlamim. These are the types of places that they would gather for idol worship. So, meaning the Rambam here is actually making a connection. It's not that Rashi Stam, the Midrash Stam, chose this idea of theaters and circuses. What did they used to do in those theaters? What did they used to do in those amphitheaters? You learn the history of the Colosseum, and everything was towards a god. Everything that they did over there was towards a god. There's always a prayer, and this god and this god and this god. Yes, people died over there, but it was a theater. It was a outdoor theater where men were killed and gladiators and fights, but it was all connection to God. There was always an element of idol worship there. And the same thing with the circus and the stadiums. There was always a mention of Avodah Zarah. And so Rambam says that's the issue over here.
Basically, the whole thing is, based on the Masechet Avodah Zarah. If all these stories and all this, not to gather with Goyim, not to be associating because of the consequences and so on.
Certainly.
So it's the same idea.
Yeah.
But all of modern day everything that we have nowadays is based off of Judeo-Christian values. So how can we say that
Like what?
Well, I mean, look at how America's run. I mean, they like all their even being sworn in is like at the end they say so help me God. So does that mean that a Jew can be president?
No, because already in the Torah there's a concept of taking oaths for something that you have or you had or not lying. Like that's straight up 10 commandments, right? So we already have biblical precedents for instituting and employing such standards. So yes, you could say Judeo-Christian law, but it's really Judea, right? It's really sourced in the Torah. Before the Christians just came, there were religious Christians that felt strongly in the Old Testament that wanted to have similar ideas here and how the way they govern and run their country.
Modern medicine wasn't like all predominantly made by Jews. I mean, like even if you look at like insulin.
But again, the Torah tells us that we can take medicine. So therefore,
but a Jew clearly a Jew didn't think about that until someone created it.
What do you mean? The Torah tells us. The Torah tells us, "V'rapo yirapeh." Yes, you're right. There's medicines being invented by the hour in this world, and Baruch Hashem, God gives the wisdom to human beings to develop that medication to help cure illness and disease. But you can't say, it's not that there was a non-Jew, Jimmy Chang, created this medicine for this disease. I can't use it because he's a goy. No, because two reasons. One, the Torah already mentions that, and second, had like we learned before, had this even the Gra would hold as fine. Had a Jew developed it, you would have used it, right? Because that's the criteria that the Vilna Gaon uses. Had a Jew mentioned it, it would have been fine. So therefore, you can use it.
There's a pre-existing concept.
Yes, exactly. Sefer Chinuch says, number 22. וכמו שעשו בספרה, קחו תנותיכם, שלא תלכו בנימוסות שלהם, בדברים החוקים להם כגון תריעתו, כעסוק על הסתירות, וכל אלו הם מיני שחוק. He adds another reason. He doesn't say what the Rambam says, that there they used to, there's an element of idolatry. He says in number 22 that these are types of frivolity. שעושים בקיבוציהם, that they do when they gather, כמתקבצים לעשות שיגעונות וזנות בעבודת אלילים. When they gather to do their outrageous activities, acts of licentiousness and idol worship. Okay, it's good. So now, what's the law of going to a stadium? All right, we have Super Bowl. People like going to hockey games. They like going to basketball games. It just works out well that we have Super Bowl this Sunday. So it was a good hook to our audience to come in. So the only source that is brought here is that of Moshe Feinstein, and it's important to read the whole source. And in his Tshuva in Igrot Moshe, where he discusses the concept of going to a stadium for sporting events, because most people go to stadiums for sporting events. Let's see what he says. He says, "Im asur mitzad bechukotehem lo telechu." Whether or not it's prohibited to go to a stadium based on chukotehem lo telechu, lalechet leteatron u'istadion sport biyamenu. That was the question he was asked. He says, "Be'elu shenikra'u teatron," regarding a theater, she'osin sham inyanes chok, where they engage in acts of frivolity, v'chen itztadion, and so to a stadium, shehem hamekomot shemesachakin sport, where they play sport games, lo shayche behu inyan uvchukotehem lo telechu. He says the prohibition of not following and their statutes, do not walk in sand, does not apply. So to go to a Maple Leaf game, or to a Montreal Canadian game, or to a Super Bowl, would not be transgressing uvchukotehem lo telechu. דהווה דווקא כשהוא חוק העקום לעשות איזה דבר בעלמא. For it's only specifically where it's a law of the Gentiles to do something, okay, like we said, it was something they did for the purpose of Avodah Zarah, which wouldn't apply for sports, clearly, here, or it has no reason, okay? You can argue that sports, there's like entertainment, there's exercise, whatever it is. But, he says, but, and a big but, he says. כשאי כתם למה שעושים, but where there is reason for what they do, כהדי צדדין, שהוא לליצנות. When you go to the stadiums and you see frivolous behavior, Leika baze mishum avodah zara. Okay, there is no concern for idolatry. Af shehu davar isur mitzur litzanut. However, there is an isur of litzanut, a frivolity. Vekol haolech sham over beisur moshav letzim ubitul Torah. And anybody that attends the Super Bowl, okay, would be transgressing Moshav Letzim. Moshav Letzim is a place, a gathering of, like we say, for frivolity jokers, and of course, bitul Torah. Lo rak al zman zeh, not just regarding the time, ela shegorem lo liot batel legamre me'torah kemforasham, but due to the fact that he's completely detached from the Torah. Meaning, it's not that he's got a book in front of him and he's spacing out and he's looking at his phone. He's totally detached from the Torah. V'kol sheken v'teatron, certainly the theaters, hanimsa ka'ed b'mdinatenu, which are found in our country, he's referring to the United States, and Moshe finds he lived in New York. V'chen ha'isadion she'mischakei sport, and the sports stadiums, ve'af b'mdinot acherot, and also in other countries, you're allowed to go there because there's no connection to idol worship. And it seems to me that the Christian priests who are part of the religion, they're the majority of the Gentiles in today's world. They're also not happy. The priests are not happy. The Muslim clerics aren't happy. The imams. Similar to those who worship Islam, which is the religion of Turkey, and the Arab countries are not happy with this. Therefore, in most countries that contain these theaters and stadiums, they have nothing to do with their religion, and it's clearly unrelated to the concept of chukotem lo telechu. Ela hem meisur letzanut ubitul Torah. But you need to know that there is an isur of frivolity in bitul Torah. Vegam od isur gadol yesh. There's also another grave sin. The magre yetzeara shel arayot benafshei deruban hem divrei nivul peh v'asata l'arayot. There's an evil inclination for women that are forbidden to him, and there's inappropriate language and temptation to arayot. So it would seem from here, and the note says here at the bottom, that if you went to a game that there was no problem with arayot, then assuming you wouldn't have been studying anyways during that time, okay, you'd probably be allowed to go. Unfortunately, Super Bowl would be definitely not that place. You cannot say or try to convince me in any way or form that going to Super Bowl does not have a yetzeara for arayot. Okay? We know the halftime show. We know the cheerleaders. we know the dancers, we know the people in the stands. It's in Las Vegas. There's nivul peh, there's bad language. There's so much that Rav Moshe Feinstein addresses, and this is in the I don't know when he wrote this tshuva, but probably in the 1970s and 60s, it was a lot less than what it was today. Okay. However, I will say that I've been to a European soccer match, and I must admit that a European soccer, or they call it football, it's just a game. There's a lot of cheering, and maybe the people in the fans aren't so clean with their language. But at the end of the day, it's 45 minutes of football per half, and then that's it. And then they just play soccer. Like there's no halftime show. There's no commercial breaks where they're doing dances like at basketball games. It's pure sport. So in those situations, okay, assuming you don't have an issue of bitul Torah, and you weren't going to be learning anyways at that time, then those are probably the most kosher games that you can go to. The Super Bowl, on the other hand, going to the Super Bowl would definitely violate many, many halachot. Not the halacha that we were thinking about. It's not the halacha of chukotem lo telechu, but halachot of pritut, halachot of letzanut, halachot of nivul peh, so frivolity and immorality, yetzara towards improperly dressed women, yetzara towards bad language and bad speech. That certainly is a problem. And therefore, I tell everybody here, I tell everybody online, if you're going to watch the Super Bowl, watch it from home. Watch it from home. You don't get to see. You got to see that now. Rabbi, the halftime show. You're right. Shut off the TV for the halftime show. Don't, and then go and study Torah. You get yourself 20 minutes of studying Mishnayot, 20 minutes of studying the Rambam. Listen to this year, put it on 1.5 speed. You'll finish almost the whole thing, okay? And then to skip the halftime show, and then you can watch the game. Okay, very good. You watch the game. You weren't going to be weren't going to be learning anyways. You watch the game and enjoy the game, and therefore you'd be okay. But going to a stadium, believe it or not, would be problematic halachically. And it's going to cost you $5,000 Canadian per ticket. Save your money. Go invest it in some no, not Bitcoin, not today. Bitcoin's a bad day today. But in other commodities that could probably make you some more money in the long run. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Wishing you a wonderful evening. Have a good night.